Now we'll start the webinar. Okay. Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. We're just letting people slowly come into the webinar and we'll be starting in just a minute. So you are in the right place if you're here to hear about the new waste and recycling changes for Yarra Ranges. Okay, the numbers look pretty steady now. I think people might still be logging in, but we'll make a start. And if anybody is wondering, we will be running through until just before 8 o'clock, and we will make sure that we log off in time for everyone to go and watch Australia beat England in the World Cup. So never fear if you're looking to watch that later on. But for now, we're here to have a chat to you all about changes that are coming up for waste and recycling in Yarra Ranges. So thank you all for coming along. With us today, we have Philippa, who is our coordinator of our waste transition team, and Amanda is our engagement officer for our waste transition team as well. And my name is Lisa, and I'm an education officer in the waste team. What we're going to be talking about tonight is really all about caring for the places that we love. That's something that's important to all of us. And we know that there's lots of people out there who do love the Yarra Ranges. So I really want to start out by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're all meeting on tonight. Where I'm presenting from is the land of the Wurundjeri of Kulin Nations, and they've cared for and had a strong connection to this land for tens of thousands of years. And so I acknowledge their elders, past and present, and also please acknowledge within yourself the traditional owners of the lands that you might be watching on as well if you're outside of Wurundjeri country. I know that some of you may be watching from Bunurong country to our south as well. And welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us tonight. We hope that you'll take some time to consider the information that we share and think about how you can help to care for the places that you love as well. So how did we get to this particular point? This is a really important place to start because waste production is becoming a really increasingly significant problem around the world. So we're increasing the amount of waste that we generate. And for our local area, so the southeast of Melbourne, landfills that are filling and soon to be closing is becoming an issue as well. So currently we send our landfill, so our rubbish from inside our rubbish bins, to a landfill that's located in Hallam South. And that particular landfill is due to close in around 2025. So it's only got about 18 months or 2 years worth of space before it will be filled and then capped over. And finding new places to place landfill for disposal is becoming really, really difficult. And we're finding that landfills are located much further away from the Yarra Ranges and also from Melbourne that we would be able to access, which would have big significant impact in cost as well. So that's something that we definitely need to consider on a local level. There's also increasing landfill levies, so the fees that are paid when waste is disposed to landfill, and also fees that are involved with and costs involved with managing closed landfills. So we do have landfills that were open in Yarra Ranges in the past. So we have them in Listerfield, in Healesville, in Wesburn, and all of that land needs to be managed for decades to look after the materials that are still emerging from that landfill, so contaminated water as well as emissions as well. There's also lots of concerns around methane emissions from landfill that's contributing to climate change. That's something we'll be talking about tonight. And overall increasing concern about sustainability and environmental impacts related to waste. So it's definitely a topic that touches us all and something that we all need to be thinking about. So addressing all of the issues that I just mentioned, all levels of government have been putting together policies to help guide towards reducing waste and also making better use of the materials that we want to dispose of. So there is an overarching national waste policy that sets the scene then for the states and local governments to also follow. We particularly have to consider the Recycling Victoria policy, which was put out in February 2020. And that sets the scene for new legislation around waste management, as well as targets that need to be met by the Victorian community as well. So I've listed some of the targets there in the dot points around diversion of waste from landfill of 80% by 2030. So this particular plan extends between 2020 and 2030. So we have to reach these goals by 2030. The state also wants to reduce organic waste that's sent to landfill and reduce the total waste produced per person by 2030 as well. And another couple of big changes that come out of this policy are that all households must have access to food and garden organics composting collections by 2030 and a separate glass collection by 2027. So they're things that come out of that state policy that then local governments have to deliver onto their local communities. And the last thing that comes out of there that's particularly relevant to us is the standardisation of bin lid colours across the state. So most of you would be familiar with having your lids changed over the last weeks, and that's part of that standardising the colours across the state to make sure that we all know, regardless of where we are, where we might move house to or where we might visit, everyone will know which bin, which items have to go into which bin. So then coming out of that Recycling Victoria policy, Yarra Ranges Council has developed a community waste and resource recovery plan to look at how we'll actually achieve those targets on a local level and how we'll roll out our services and also work with the community to reduce waste. So in developing that particular plan, we conducted a community waste survey in 2021, and that invited all residents across Yarra Ranges to contribute to the survey to give their thoughts and experiences on using waste services. And we considered that feedback together with industry research into best practice for waste management and behaviour change and the experiences of other councils who have already been moving ahead of us into meeting these particular types of waste reduction targets as well. And the plan itself was adopted by Council in June 2023. So as I mentioned, many of you would be familiar with work that's been happening over the last weeks to change our rubbish bin lids to red. And that's much of that work has been completed already. So many of you would already have a red lid. And the bin lids, as I mentioned, will be changing across the state of Victoria. So all rubbish bins in each council by 2030 will have a red lid. All recycling bins would have a yellow lid. All food and garden organic bins, which will be required collections in each council area, they'll have a lime green lid, and eventually with glass bins that would be provided as a purple lidded bin. And the real reasoning behind those changes is to remove any confusion, as I mentioned, around what items can go into which bin, and also to help reduce contamination, which is a real issue in recycling. So FOGO, the introduction of food and garden organics collections, will be a big change for Yarra Rangers and for many of our residents. So that will be a lime green lidded bin, which some properties already have, and that will be the place for all of your food and garden organic waste. So anything that's been growing, anything that you've eaten, anything that's been growing in your garden can go into this bin from October the 2nd. Properties who already have a green waste bin, your green waste bin will become your FOGO bin. So you will have the lime green lidded bin that you already have, and that will become your FOGO bin. Residents who don't currently have a green waste bin will be receiving a lime green lidded bin during August and September. So we've just started this week with the delivery of the new FOGO bins to households that don't already have a green waste bin. So properties who do have a green waste bin at the moment, they'll be paying the green waste fees up until September the 30th. And then after that time, when all of the bins transfer across to being FOGO bins, all properties will have the FOGO cost included within their rates on their waste charge, on their rates notices. So it's a separate charge on the back of your rates notice. You'll see that there's details of a waste charge on there, and the FOGO costs will be included within that. So the green waste fees will only continue up until September 30. All properties will also get a kitchen caddy, which is a 7-litre grey coloured bucket to collect your food scraps into, and also compostable caddy liners and an information kit during August and September. So if you're getting a new food and garden organics bin, the FOGO bin, when that gets delivered to your house, you'll also have the caddy included with that. If you already have a green waste bin, you'll just receive the caddy with the liners and the information kit. And the information kit will have lots of useful details on how you can use all the different bins that you have, and also other collections that we provide and other places that you can use to dispose of difficult to dispose items. And I'll note as I go through that I forgot to mention at the start, we have received questions that people did submit when you were registering for this webinar. So I am including some of that information in this presentation, and we will go through some of those. All the questions that we haven't covered in the presentation will be covered at the end. But if you do have other questions as we go along, you can submit those using the Q&A button on your screen. There was a question that was submitted earlier around the liners for the kitchen caddies. And so we will be providing compostable caddy liners that meet the Australian standard, and they will be provided for free. You'll get a roll of those inside your caddy as part of your FOGO kit when you first receive your caddy. And they should last you around about 6 months. So we're looking at most people will use maybe 3 liners a week. And if you do find that you need more liners down the track, you will be able to contact council to have more liners mailed out to you free of charge, or alternatively, you'll be able to go into one of our community links and collect liners there as well. So there will be fresh liners provided as you need them. Alternatively, if you prefer not to use a liner, you can use newspaper, paper towel, those kind of products to line the caddy, or you can use no liner at all if you'd prefer. It's completely up to you how you use that material. So the purpose of the caddy is to have in your kitchen, that you can have it on the bench or under your sink or something like that, that you can collect the food waste into the caddy, and then once it's full up, or once it's been 2 or 3 days, you can take that material out to your FOGO bin and place it into there. The reason why we decided to go with providing the kitchen caddy and the compostable liner is because the industry research demonstrated to us that if we provide those pieces of equipment, that more people are likely to use the FOGO service. So where a composting caddy and the compostable liners aren't provided, less people actually take up the use of the service. So we really wanted to make sure that people had everything that they need to use the service well. And some of the reasoning behind why we want so many people to take up composting via our FOGO service is because we did conduct a household waste audit of rubbish bins from across Yarra Ranges a couple of months ago. So in April 2023, we actually looked at the rubbish, recycling and green waste bins from households across Yarra Ranges. And those audits were conducted in accordance with statewide waste auditing guidelines that are provided through Sustainability Victoria, a government department, and they work with councils across Victoria to run these kind of audits as well. So we can compare our audit information with other councils and see how we're tracking. And the things that we did find out, if we look at the image on the right-hand side, generally, as an average across all of the contents of the rubbish bins, we found that 45% of the waste that was collected was material that could have gone into a FOGO bin. So 45% of the rubbish that was collected was made up of food waste, garden waste, and paper towel or tissues, all items that could have gone into a FOGO bin. Another 8% was items that could have gone into recycling. So some of this was food in containers that could have been emptied out and then the container placed into the recycling bin. And some of it was items that people have placed into the into the rubbish bin instead of the recycling bin. 3% was e-waste or hazardous waste. So this is really important that we let people know not to put these items into your rubbish bin. E-waste is anything that has a power cord or that is battery powered. And those items can be recycled through transfer stations and in your hard rubbish collections. And it's really important that we don't put those items into our bin because they do contain materials that are hazardous to the environment if they're put into landfill. And they have precious metals in them as well, which can be recycled and reclaimed and reused for other purposes. And so within that 3% was also items like batteries, which we also should not put into rubbish bins or any bins. They can start fires and they also contain materials that are hazardous, and they can also be recycled as well. So you can take things like batteries to some stores as well. So places like Bunnings, Aldi has battery recycling bins as well. And there's information on the council website of where you can take those kind of items too. So when we did the audit, we found that in the average rubbish bin, 44% was items that actually needed to go to landfill. So it was a considerable amount that was actually able to go into other bins. And we realised that not everybody's rubbish bin is going to look like this. It is an average. So some people will have no food waste in their bin, but some people have a lot of food waste in their bin. And when we're designing waste collection systems, we need to design them that they're going to suit the largest number of people in the community. And so that has informed a lot of how we've also designed the system that's coming up soon. Some of our other key findings were that 27% of the average recycling bin was made up of items that were contaminating those bins. So we need to ensure that we're looking at what can go into our recycling bins before actually placing them into the bin and reducing contamination in those as much as possible. And the current green waste bins had a very low contamination rate, which is a good thing, but we also understand that contamination in FOGO, when it changes from green waste to FOGO, will rise a little bit. but we hope to keep that as minimal as possible and ideally as low as it currently is at 3.1%. So the results for Yarra Ranges were comparable to the majority of councils across Victoria and also across Australia. We know that food waste is a problem across Australia and around the world through international research. So there were no surprises for us in this audit, but we do acknowledge that that not all households will have a bin that looks exactly like this. So reducing our emissions from food waste is something that's really important, and I just wanted to spend a little bit of time just having a look at some of this information as well. So when we place food waste into our rubbish bins, that food waste goes to landfill, which then creates methane emissions. So when food waste is put into landfill, it's actually capped over with clay, and then as it breaks down in with no oxygen present, so anaerobically. When it's breaking down anaerobically, there's actually microbes that can break down the food waste, and they thrive in an anaerobic environment. Excuse me. So those particular microbes that love the anaerobic environment and are breaking down the food waste, they create methane emissions as part of their the breakdown process of the food waste. And those methane emissions have 28 times the global warming potential of carbon dioxide. So a lot of people would have heard about carbon emissions, about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere creating global warming or climate change. And so there are a number of different molecules that can contribute to climate change. Carbon dioxide is only one, and another of those is methane. But methane then is much more damaging as a greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. So it's really important that we try and take that food waste out of landfill so that we're reducing the amount of methane that's created by that food waste decomposing anaerobically. When we put it into a composting system instead, we're actually adding oxygen as part of the composting process. And when we do that, we're killing off those microbes that were creating all of the methane in the anaerobic environment of the landfill. So that's why it's preferable to place food waste into composting rather than putting it into landfill to significantly decrease the greenhouse gas emissions. So around the world, 8 to 10% of global greenhouse emissions from food waste comes from food waste, and that in particular is food that isn't consumed. So a small amount of that 8 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions comes from the production process using machinery for harvesting of food crops and that kind of thing. Some of it comes from transport and some of it comes from handling, putting it into sales and that kind of thing. But a large majority of the emissions that come from food waste are actually coming out of landfill when green waste and food waste is put into landfill. So when we put it into composting systems instead, it does significantly reduce the greenhouse gases produced. And if we have a look at the image at the top on the right-hand side, you can see that on the top, we have the emissions that are coming from food waste that are put into landfill, and it is 557 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent per tonne of food waste that's placed into landfill. If we compare that to if we were to place the same amount of food into into composting, 1 tonne of food waste into composting will only produce 22 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. So the carbon dioxide equivalent is the way that methane is measured so that the emissions can actually be compared between the different types of molecules. So overall, the savings and reductions in greenhouse gases that can be made by composting. Instead of putting it to landfill, you can reduce the emissions produced through by putting the materials into compost by 25%. So there is a significant saving in greenhouse gas emissions by composting rather than putting it into landfill, your food waste. And if we have a look at the items at the bottom, and I'll make sure that these slides are placed on our website so that you can look at those in more detail. But at the bottom, it actually tells us about the emissions that come from collection. So the red section talks about the emissions that come from collecting our rubbish, our food waste through our street collections. It measures the transport in the pink, and then in the purple, fuel use. And we can see that significant reductions are made, and you'll be able to, when you have a look at the slides at a later point, if that's something that you're interested in doing, there's information there around the breakdown of how greenhouse gases are produced by actually putting the materials into compost rather than landfill. But what that information does tell us is that even though we may be using trucks to collect waste, to transport the waste to composting facilities, the emissions are still quite low. So if we were to only travel 50 kilometres or 100 kilometres, the emissions overall, the net emissions would be around 9 kilograms and 17 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent. If we travel 100 kilometres using turned windrows, which is a type of composting process, it goes up to 22. So that middle scenario is around about what our process will be using for Yarra ranges. So it's a significant saving in greenhouse gas emissions. And we know that if people compost at home, that we can also reduce our greenhouse gas emissions from food waste. And the main thing is making sure that we can actually take it out of landfill. But we know that FOGO will help people to be able to compost at home as well, complementing with providing a place that you can put your meat, your bones, dairy, the type of things that you may not choose to compost at home as well, to reduce rodents visiting your property. And the FOGO will also help to reduce bushfire fuels on your property as well, and minimise the amount that you would need to burn off by using the weekly FOGO service as well. So what happens to our FOGO materials once they are collected? They are taken to a facility in Dandenong South where they are screened for different contaminating items. So you can see in one of the photos on the top right-hand corner that there's quite a bit of metal waste that's been collected out of the load that we viewed a few weeks ago. And there's also a conveyor belt where materials go along and are picked off by hand, the contaminating items. So that's one reason why it's really important to make sure that we don't put things like dog poo, kitty litter, those kind of things, because there is a manual sorting process with the FOGO material as well. So that's something that we're not able to put in our FOGO bins. Then it goes to a rural composting facility where it is manually composted and uses machinery to turn the windrows to oxygenate the materials, and that obviously, as I mentioned before, that oxygenation helps to reduce the methane emissions as well, and then creates compost, which you can see on the bottom of the screen, that then can be contributing back into soil improvement on farms and in gardens. So there's market gardens as an example there. The FOGO material is collected by a company called BioGrow, and they have a ongoing partnership with the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show. So I've got some examples there of things that they've done for the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show, for example, as uses of our FOGO material. It also goes into horticultural production for plants that you buy at nurseries. It goes onto farms for soil improvement, and the material also goes into bagged potting mix and compost that you can buy at nurseries and hardware stores as well. So what can go in your FOGO bin? We'll be having these full lists in our information kit that will come with your caddy. So this is just a clipping of what items can and can't go in. So the compostable liners that we will be providing can go in, and all of your meat scraps, including your meat, bones, eggs, dairy, soft seafood shells, bread, pasta, leftovers, paper items like tissues and paper towel, serviettes, and also all of your garden waste. So all your grass clippings, sticks, twigs, flowers, leaves that you collect from around your property can all go into that bin. So this information will be available in your information kit. We will have information on our website, or we do, about the different bin packages and waste charges. So the waste charge on your rates notice, if you have a look at that when it comes, there's a single charge, which is your waste charge, and that collects all of the fees for your overall waste collection and provision of your bin package. Each property will have a bin package that is made up of recycling, FOGO and rubbish. So that will make up the basis of your bin package. The waste charge also contributes to the cost of street and park litter bin provision. Also the management of our closed landfill. I mentioned before that we have 3 or 4 different closed landfill sites in Yarra Ranges that need to be managed on an ongoing basis. And it also funds our waste education and administration of our collection service. But the whole provision of our waste collection is the fees are structured for cost recovery. So there's no actual money made on this particular fee. It's all based on how much it costs us to deliver the service. And so all households have to have a minimum of 1 package, and a package would look something like the bins that are on your screen there. So you'd have 1 recycling, 1 FOGO, and 1 rubbish bin. And each household that's provided with services by council needs to have all 3 bins. And there's different options that you can have for each of those bins as well. So recycling, you can have a 120 or a 240. And that's a change because previously everyone needed to have a 240. The FOGO bins, you'll be able to have a 120 or a 240, depending on what suits your needs. And also the rubbish bins, you'll be able to have an 80 or a 120 litre. All of the packages and their different charges are listed on our council website. So you can go there and there's a link here which will be on the when we put these slides onto the Why Waste It website. That link will be available, but if you go onto the General Council website, you go to the Environment tab, you'll see waste, and then on the waste page, you can go into waste charges and see all of that information. And as well as having your main minimum bin package, you can also order any additional bins individually on top of that initial package. So if you need an extra rubbish bin or you need an extra FOGO bin, you can order those individually and of the size that would suit you for a small fee. There will be changes in the frequency of how often we collect these different bins as well. So there will be a change between the current green waste, which will become FOGO, and the rubbish bins. So from October 2023, the 1st or 2nd is the Monday of October, the FOGO bins, all the green waste bins will become FOGO bins and they will be collected weekly. So that will be swapping directly with the rubbish bins, which will change over to the fortnightly collection. So FOGO bins collected weekly. Recycling bins will continue to be collected fortnightly, and there'll be no change to the schedule for their collection. And rubbish bins, as I mentioned, will be collected fortnightly on the opposite week to when your recycling bin is collected. So as an example, if in the first week of October you have your recycling bin collected, the other bin that you would put out would be your FOGO bin. The following week, you put your FOGO bin out and your rubbish bin. And if you have additional bins, say you have an additional rubbish bin, you would put that out with your first rubbish bin on the rubbish week. And then you go back to the initial week, FOGO bin goes out with the recycling bin, and the next week, FOGO bin goes out with the rubbish bin. There'll be more information in your information kit when you get your FOGO caddy. So you'll be able to have a look on there about how you can get access to your waste calendar for those collections as well. But if you have a think about when your recycling bin is going to be emptied at the end of September, that should help you to work out when your rubbish bin would next go out. And so what goes into your recycling bin will change slightly. Generally will remain the same, but there will be some small changes. We will only be able to put codes 1, 2, and 3 of plastics. So bottles with their lids is fine. Plastic containers, plastic trays and jars, they will all, ones that are coded 1, 2, or 3 with the recycling symbol are the only ones that will be able to go into the recycling bin from October onwards. And that's because all of our recycling now has to be done in Australia. We can't export recycling anymore according to new federal waste laws. And so there's only facilities and markets within Australia at the moment to recycle codes 1, 2, and 3. So they're the only ones that our recycling contractor will be accepting. So you may need to have a look at the items that you currently purchase and see if there's alternatives that you can change over to. And hopefully also in the future, there'll be new technology developed for the other codes of plastics, so particularly the 5s and the 7s. Another item that will have changed from the current allowance into the recycling bin is our UHT and Tetra Pak containers. So if you get UHT milk, if you get soup in Tetra Pak containers, or you have juice boxes in kids' lunches, those can no longer be recycled. They're actually composite materials, so they have plastic, foil, and cardboard all mushed in together, and it's very difficult to separate those for recycling. So there's not actually facilities currently in Australia that can deal with those materials, and until there is, we can't accept them in recycling bins, so they will need to go into rubbish bins. And as I mentioned, there is the waste and recycling guide that will be in your information kit, and that will also have this really handy A to Z guide with lots of information on where to put different items. And it also have information on how you can recycle difficult to recycle items. So if you need more information on the changes that are coming up, we do have a specific website with all of the information on the new collections. If you go to www.yarrarangers.vic.gov.au/why-waste-it, you'll find information on there. And you'll also find information about other locations where we're going to be for upcoming events to answer any more of your questions that we don't get to tonight. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to move on to some of the questions that were submitted to us when you registered. We've got a few of those, and then we'll also look at the questions that have been submitted tonight as well. So Amanda, have you got some of the questions for us to look at?
Definitely. Thanks very much, Lisa. So some of the questions that we've received here is, well, I do apologise. Thanks, Lisa. One of the first questions is, how do I get an extra bin if the landlord won't order one? Perhaps Philippa, you could answer that one.
So it is the property owner who needs to order any additional bins. That would be something that you could negotiate, possibly. Going through your real estate agent would be the best option for that, to try and negotiate with the landlord for them to order you another bin.
Excellent, thank you. Another one, why are old green lidded waste bins still being collected when they didn't receive a sticker nor red lid? I can probably answer this one. The old green lids, some of the bins actually are not compatible with the red lids. So we do have a certain number of them that actually have to have a full changeover. This is being managed by our contractor currently, and you'll see and notice those bins actually change. Or perhaps there was something wrong with the actual bin itself. It might have actually had a broken handle, so they couldn't actually replace the actual lid. So over time, you will see these change, but it doesn't actually change the collection service. They still will be collected by our waste trucks. Moving on to a question, will there be reduction in garbage charge as we'll only be getting one pickup of general waste per fortnight? I think a couple of other people have asked this in the chat as well. Philippa or Lisa?
I can start on that one. So technically, you will be having the same number of collections. So it will be a direct change between rubbish and FOGO bins. So currently green waste is collected each fortnight. That will be changing over to weekly, and then the rubbish bin itself will change to fortnightly. So it's actually the same number of collections. You're still getting 2 bins collected each fortnight. And for some people who don't currently have a green waste bin, you'll actually be having an additional bin collected per fortnight. Oh, sorry, per week. So overall, for some people, there is an actual increase in services. So in terms of cost, if we were, rubbish is more expensive to dispose of as well. So that's something that, is definitely an influencer on our costs as well. So if we were to put more rubbish into landfill on an ongoing basis, it would be incredibly expensive in the long term. So we want to reduce that as much as possible as well. We realise that presents a challenge for a lot of people looking at how you actually purchase products, what can and can't go into the rubbish bin. And we do recognise that that's a challenge, but we hope that people will give this new system a try and see what you can manage for your household. There is additional bins available as well. As I mentioned, you can order additional bins out of any of the 3 bins that are available. Did you have anything to add, Philippa, in regards to rates or the waste charge?
You've covered it well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that question actually moves on to a couple of questions that we've received live tonight. So one of them is the Yarra Ranges Waste Survey 2021 had north of 7,000 responses to it, of which 60% of respondents said they wanted to keep their general waste collection. Instead of the proposed fortnightly schedule, we might see overflowing bins with waste that cannot be disposed in the FOGO, for example, medical waste and nappies. Why has the council moved ahead with fortnightly collection despite the majority of the community not wanting this schedule? And there's also a couple of questions around that from other participants around nappies as well.
Yeah. So with regards to the community waste survey, so we did have 60% of people, when we asked them how they would like their rubbish bin to be collected in the future, we did have 60% of people say that they would like the weekly collection. However, when we came to the point of actually using the outcomes of the survey to develop our policy and our waste plan for the next years, we did look at the research from across Australia and internationally to how what's the best practice for managing waste to reduce rubbish going to landfill, and also to ensure that people make the best use out of the FOGO system. We looked at all of that research around Australia and globally, and then used that also to inform the decisions that were made. So we know that if we provide the FOGO bins on a weekly basis, then we know that more people will use that service. and we know that the cost of providing the rubbish service continually on a weekly basis is incredibly high, and also disincentivises people from finding ways to actually reduce rubbish. So we want to help people to work their ways through the challenges that we know that this system is going to bring up, and also help all of you to look at ways that you can reduce your rubbish as well. And in the future, hopefully not too distant future, we will also be able to return to soft plastics recycling as well, which will also make a big difference. So we know that that's something that is a challenge for a lot of people, but it is something that governments are working at a state and federal level. I don't want to make any promises for anyone, but I did read something about potentially soft plastics returning at the start of 2024, but we'll wait and see what's decided at that, because that is all at a state and national level. But that is something that will be coming in eventually, and will make a big difference to rubbish bins as well. So we know that it's a challenge, but we really ask people to give it a try. We have heard from a lot of people from other council areas. We have members of our team, we have other staff at council, and people who we work with on a regular basis from other councils who have already implemented this system, and it's been highly successful in a lot of areas. For example, Nillumbik has had this kind of system with fortnightly rubbish for 35 years, and they do have a similar system to us, and it has been successful that they've had it for that long, and we've had really good feedback from people who live in that area. So we encourage people to give it a try, to think about the kind of items that you purchase and how you can potentially make changes. And our team is also available to help you through in finding alternatives as well.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Lisa, for that. It does cover off a couple of other questions. We did have some soft plastic questions, so I think you've covered that now. We'll continuing on the nappy conversation. Will council be introducing rebates for nappies or sanitary items like many other councils?
Yeah. So with regards to nappy rebates, we've recently been participating in a project that's been funded by Sustainability Victoria, and we're working with around 12 other councils on that. So we've done research with a consultant into how we can best help communities to take up reusable nappies as an option. One of the findings of that research was that one of the key barriers for people taking up the use of reusable nappies was really around familiarity with what products they could buy, how they could manage them, that kind of thing. And the barrier of, what was I going to say? Sorry, my mind's just gone blank. Sorry, the cost factor. So yeah, one of the things that we did question amongst the participants in the survey as part of that project is whether cost was actually a barrier to taking up reusable nappies. And we found that that wasn't actually a barrier for the majority of people that participated in the research. So we've been working with that particular research to determine the project that we go ahead with in the future. And we're looking to roll out a reusable nappy education project, but at this stage it won't involve incentives, financial incentives, because that wasn't part of the recommendations of the initial study. For sanitary items, reusable sanitary items, we're in the process of finalising our research on that. So we did have another funded project with Sustainability Victoria and a group of councils. And we should have information coming through from that research soon to let us know what the best ways are that will be able to help people adopt reusable sanitary items as well. And that'll be going through incontinence as well as period products.
Thanks, Lisa. Another question is, I have 2 children in nappies, and this has come up a couple of times in the conversation, and I think we've covered a little bit, but we've just got an additional question here. So I have 2 children in nappies, and fortnightly collections will be challenging. Knox provide an additional waste bin free of charge? Will Yarra Ranges Council be doing the same? If not, and why? Maybe Philippa, if you can take that one.
Yeah, absolutely. We do know that some other councils are offering some reduced cost services or free bins for nappies. We see waste as Lisa outlined earlier, that it is a cost recovery system. So where families are creating more waste, there's additional cost in that. We have the option to be able to order an additional bin if people find that they really can't cope with the collection as it stands as fortnightly. Certainly, there have been studies shown around, and as Lisa said, in Nillumbik, they've been using this same service for many years, that although it sounds very scary and people are incredibly worried that they're not going to be able to fit them in, it actually is more manageable than people find. So at the moment, no, there won't be any free services provided. There will be a review after about 6 months of that element of the service. And we'll see what the outcome of that is at that time. And there's certainly, we don't know whether that will change, but at this stage, no, that it is a requirement to pay for another bin if you do have extra waste.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Philippa. Moving on to a couple of recycling questions now. One of them is, what monitoring of FOGO is done to reduce plastics and microplastics in the compost material?
Yep. So we do have a monitoring system and also provide feedback to residents from the curbside. So that's one way that we'll be monitoring plastics going into the FOGO system. So some of you might have received a feedback tag on your bin to say whether there's been contaminating items found. So we have consultants that go out each week, and they'll look into the top of different bins that are out on the curb for collection. So they'll lift up the lid, have a look around the items at the top of the bin to get an indication of what's inside the bin, and they'll provide feedback to the residents about what's been seen. So if you've got a bin that doesn't have contamination in it, recycling or FOGO, you'd get a green tag, and if you do have contaminating items, you'll get an orange or a red tag that just says, in the future, please keep these items out of your bin. So that will be one way that we'll be able to track if there's contamination. And then also we do have through the sorting process, there is sorting of items to remove contamination. So unfortunately, it doesn't pick up on some of the really small items. So fruit stickers, bread tags, all those kind of things are much more difficult. The smaller the item is, the more difficult it is to get out of that system. And we'll be getting regular feedback from the processors on what they're finding in terms of contamination rates at the processing centre. So I guess the main thing that that we're hoping people will do is to look at the information we provide of what not to put into your FOGO bin as well, and increasing the amount of education that we provide on what can and can't go in.
Excellent. Thanks, Lisa. Probably an easy one here. What can I do with packaging that can't be recycled? Well, maybe not easy. But I think our waste guide that's coming out in the education pack should help with this.
Yeah,
and alternatives.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are some items that can go to other collections, and we've tried to highlight those in the waste and recycling guide as well. Things like polystyrene can be recycled. And there are local collections that you can do for textiles, old shoes, all different materials, as well as donating to charities as well. So yeah, there will be more information coming on some of the collections for difficult to recycle items.
Excellent. All right. So I think there's a comment thread with a few other questions coming live about opting out. So question here is, why can't residents fully opt out of all waste services, even if yeah, what to say here? Sorry. Why can't residents fully opt out of all waste services, even if still having a charge for the other waste costs, such as landfill sites and public bins? Whoa. Sorry, I thought that one was just generally about opting out for compost. So I think we've got a thread of 2 questions coming through. So one question is about why can't I opt out of having a FOGO bin, and why hasn't council actually decided to provide that for the community? And another one is actually opting out of all waste services.
Did you want to take the all waste services, Philippa?
Certainly can. So there's actually a legislative requirement that we provide waste services for all residences. So that's the requirement that we have to work to under the state level legislation. The only exception to that is properties that are over 4 hectares can apply for an exemption, but we do need to be able to have evidence that that waste is being managed in an environmentally responsible way. So that there is that potential to apply for a property over 4 hectares, but otherwise we are legislated we need to provide the waste services to all residences.
Yep. And in terms of the FOGO potential to opt out of FOGO, we are also legislated to provide a food and garden organics collection to all properties. So that's part of the new waste and recycling legislation that's come through with the Recycling Victoria policy. And the FOGO bin cost is included in the waste charge. So the waste charge is the overall charge for all of the services that we provide, and that's calculated based on a shared cost model across the whole community. So if we do provide opt-outs for anything, it actually makes the system more expensive for everybody. So the best way that we can provide all of our waste collection services, waste management services in the most affordable way for the entire community is to have that shared cost amongst all of the residents. So we're not providing that opt-out option, and we know that there's only a very, very small number of councils, only 2 that we know of, who are providing an opt-out of FOGO, and they may not be able to provide that in the long term because there will be further guidance coming out from the state government to ensure that all councils are actually providing that legislative requirement to give a FOGO service. So that's what we're acting on at the moment, that we are required to provide that service.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. Just having a look through. Philippa, can you see some other questions that perhaps we haven't answered as yet? One of them is, does recycling need to be rinsed? Should I remove lids or sticky tape from recycling?
No, you don't need to rinse out your recycling as long as the items are empty. That's the main thing. Don't put containers from yogurt or anything like that that still has yogurt in them into the recycling bin. Scrape them out a bit. Make sure they're nice and clean, just of scraping the contents out, and then you can put it straight into the recycling bin. However, if you prefer to keep your recycling bin nice and clean, you want to avoid smells, you can rinse it if you like. That's completely up to you, but it's not required. Lids can stay on. That's fine as well. So milk bottles, juice bottles, all those lids can stay on.
Okay. Here's a really good question. Oh, yep, you go for it, Philippa.
There was a question around the difference in the rates for existing GoBin customers and new FOGO customers. So I just wanted to explain that difference. So if you have an existing GoBin, we're still using those as a garden organics bin until the end of September. So we have that use. The new bins aren't going to come into use until the beginning of October. So people with an existing garden organics bin are actually having that service continue through until October, and that's where the difference in the charge comes in.
Excellent. All right, I've got one here about why did Yarra Ranges Council decide on higher waste targets and state government required? Did residents agree to this given that we will pay for it?
So the targets that were decided on by council were debated by and adopted by the councillors and supported by the waste team as well to aim for higher than the state targets. So that is what we will be working towards, and it's I guess something to aim for in terms of reductions. So yeah, it was a decision between councillors and also with the waste team's input as well.
So I think a lot of the questions are probably covered with the on the FAQs on our website. So I know we're running out of time.
Yep.
So looking at the ones that are there, we probably do have answers to most of those. If you all want to have a look on our website and have a look through the frequently asked questions there, it should cover most of them. Lisa, did you want to add to that with the questions that have come in tonight?
I think the other thing with the questions that are coming in is that we are running out of time, unfortunately, to answer more of the questions, but we will be having another session in early September. So if you have a look either at our Facebook page or at our Why Wasted website, where we have listed our upcoming events, we will have information on our next webinar, which will be a question and answer webinar, and that should be on the 6th of September. And I'll send around an email after today, which will include that information as well and a registration link. But I think, yeah, much of the information, if we haven't been able to answer it tonight, as Philippa said, will be available on our website as well. Is there any more questions in there, Amanda, that you think?
There's one here that I don't believe is on our FAQ. So I don't want the kitchen caddy. I compost everything in my own compost bins at home. Can I reject the caddy? Absolutely, you can return the kitchen caddy to one of our community links. And yeah, so you don't actually have to have the caddy at home. But otherwise, a lot of the other questions there, yeah, as Philippa and Lisa have mentioned, are answered in a lot of our FAQs. But otherwise, also our customer experience team are available from 8:30 till 5 o'clock every day on Monday to Friday. So they can actually answer questions as well that perhaps you can't find on our website.
Okay. So we might leave it for there. We do realise that there are other questions, but please do visit our Why Wasted website and you can find the answers for those, or you can contact us for further information as well through council. But thank you everyone for attending, and we also will be having pop-up face-to-face displays where we can answer more of your questions as well. So please look at our Why Wasted website, and if you have questions that haven't been able to be answered today, we will be able to answer those face-to-face as well if you can't find the information on the Why Wasted website. So we look forward to seeing you in person if you are interested to come and have a chat as well. But thanks everyone for coming along, and hope you have a good night, and go Matildas. All right. See you later. Bye.
Good night.